Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Authors Fit. My name is Munira Hussein. Today, I have the one and only Yvonne Adhiambo Owuor with me, and we will be talking everything writing, the history of writing in Africa, and so much more. Yvonne Adhiambo Owuor is an internationally acclaimed Kenyan author, cultural instigator, and intellectual. She shot to global prominence in 2003 when her novella The Weight of Whispers won the prestigious Kane Prize for African writing. She is the author of two deeply poetic and highly celebrated novels, Dust, 2014, which was shortlisted for the Folio Prize, and The Dragonfly Sea, 2019, a groundbreaking coming-of-age story exploring the intimate human landscapes of Africa-China relations. Her forthcoming works include the Afro-Gothic saga Nocturne and the cross-continental novel Coffee Mistress. A recipient of Kenya's Head of State Commendation, Owuor is a sought-after global speaker on polycentric futures, geopolitics, and world building. Beyond her writing, she is a dedicated conservationist, the co-founder of the Macondo Literary Festival, and the board member of East Africa's preeminent digital journal, The Elephant. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Munira. Thank you very much.
It is an honor. I tell you, I haunt you because I love listening to you more than just reading you. And it's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Munira.
Yeah. So I remember when I wrote to you, I said I was inspired sort of by something you mentioned. And I think this is a fallacy that we have built around the narrative on African writing and writing being introduced to Africa through colonialism or brought to us through European influence.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we get this notion that this is what happened when it's very far from the truth?
We were, as a continent, we were subjected to many levels of war,
Yes.
and one of the primary ones actually was what you call the epistemic war, the war that was to actually not just extract but vacuum out the idea that there were civilizational impulses on the continent. I think when I think more and more about it, there's not a moment where I think, there's a moment that, you read it, you find it, and you kind of say, these people were demonic, really,
Yes.
because the evisceration of entire nations, not just epistemologies, but orthographies, the fact that they were writing. So for a long time, and I know fortunately that nonsense left my head much sooner. I'm sure you also, when you were in school, you were told that Africa is an oral culture.
Yes.
And that Africa had no written history. And the only kind of writing that shows up is when the European appears on our shores, which is outrageous when you think about it.
Yeah,
outrageous. But unfortunately, it's a kind of propaganda and hypnotism that got embedded and then gets retold in our own stories. And then when our teachers and our own so-called history books repeat the lie, unfortunately, people start to imbibe it and believe it. So that we find ourselves in this time, and it's very important that you mention it. We find ourselves having to even push back against that in this contemporary age. So, so in summary, how does it happen? Is that there was a war. It is a war against the soul, the spirit, the imagination of the African.
Yeah, I think our education also prepares us for not here. What we learn in schools is somehow not for a tool that we can use in this environment. We learn about all these histories that apply to us very little, and none of it goes beyond colonialism, so that we never get to know who we are.
And it's a terrifying tragedy, but it's also a kind of when you think about it, you can look at our fellow Africans and say, guys, come on, really? How do we start to believe that our history only begins when the Europeans show up? This is the continent and country that are the custodian of entire human history. Humanity's evolution as a cultural being starts right here. Our history is over 50,000 years old. But there is an agenda linked to that, Munira, as you well know. People who think that they're floating only, their identity and lives start on the backs and energies and corpses, so to say, of strangers, will always become strangers to their own lives and land.
True.
So, and that's what happened to us. Yeah.
It's unfortunate because every time I learn something new about pre-colonial Africa, I am in awe. It's amazing. The kingdoms that we had, there were trade wars and whatnot, but those have always been there. But there was all this history of very rich cultural history of kingdoms and leadership and queens. You know, there's this assumption that African women have always been subdued. And I don't know how we came to this point in history, but how do we awaken to this knowledge and stop thinking that we have always been a subdued continent, maybe?
Or that we are not a civilizational force, you know, or we are not. So to understand that it was a terrible, terrible game. A war, actually. It's a war against imagination and a war against the spirit. But having woken to that, sometimes when you're addicted, the first point of healing comes from the acknowledgement. So we've acknowledged it, and more need to acknowledge it. But then that means then we have the privilege, at least, of being able to salvage and extract. We've got the lie of we've got ruins that we can still draw upon. We've got histories that are written but also hidden, mostly in Western capitals and museums. I think there's a gift of a generation, a new generation. I think your generation, who are daring to go out to not just bring back this knowledge, but to make sure that knowledge is also available. So to do the counter propaganda of recovery, the work of recovery, the work of salvage, and to get excited doing it. Yes,
I think it's not even that difficult to convince the people that the people of this continent. And there's this Pan-African movement in every African country. I think there's a group of young people that are always doing something that is new, something that is more informative and awakening. And I always love to see that.
I think it's really an exciting time, to be honest, especially to be African, because there's more than that, there's a recovery and a reclamation that's taking place. Yeah.
That's beautiful to see. And I think that also explains why there has been an explosion of historical fiction being written within the continent to just sort of reflect and connect and reconnect with what we have lost in this period of, do we call it ignorance or being?
It's a war.
Yes,
we've been in a state, and we still are in a state of war.
Yes. So I think that urge to remember is really important, and to just go back and unearth what we were forced to bury, or what was buried for us, actually.
What was buried for us in these acts of war.
Yes. What is it that how do we address everything then in our writing, especially? How do we address the past, the colonial, that is, and then the past pre-colonial, and this present, and how do we connect all this with the future that we aspire to for this continent and generally the world? Maybe.
You know, that question is not even as simple as it seems, because where do we start? We start by reclaiming time. The assumption, we tend to think that time is the clock that was also brought in. To understand, what does time mean for us? What does space mean for us? It's the idea of what you call the transtemporal. What we call the future is not necessarily the future. The fact that the past is very much present in the present. Yes, the past is present. It's present in the present, and it also is the future. Do you understand?
Yes.
So to reclaim time, and then to do what the Chinese and the Koreans have done so successfully, to use the power of media, for example. What they do is they reenact their history through historical drama to remind the people about who they are.
Yes.
Do you understand? So when people see themselves in the past that feels very present, something happens to the spirit. As you said, what do writers do? Exactly that. To understand that history is our treasure.
Yes.
It's our treasury. To dare to go into the archives, to the museums, to extract and find stories. There's so many. When you go in, I think what is so overwhelming is how many beautiful stories of us, of our people.
Yes.
How many, and you want to tell this story and tell that story and tell, but you can only choose one because you're limited.
Yes.
But there's such exquisite stories of us that are begging to be told and found. We also need the researchers. It's a situation of all hands to deck. We need the psychohistorians. We need all hands to deck in this particular venture. Yes.
That is beautiful. And it's not an easy task, and with the not knowing where to start specifically, because there's so much work to be done. But then in our little spaces, we do what we can to educate, to inform, and your writings have been inspirational on that front.
Thank you.
Especially the reflection. You feel, and I love the poetic writing. So I feel like the beauty of language always takes precedence for me when I'm reading. So I actually get to enjoy reading you. Yeah. So we will come back to writing itself. What is your research process? Because I feel like we don't know where to look for information sometimes, especially because our stories have always been told in different light. So where do we go to for the true stories of the African continent, or the true stories of us that we want to tell?
Again, I go back to the fact that we're privileged to be here, and the fact that so many aspects of that which was supposedly buried, we can still find. You can still go to the ruins in Gedi. You can go to Lamu itself. You can go to Kitmikai, and every single place. The landscape itself has incredible stories. So to go. I love that this generation, their preference is actually touring and traveling in Kenya and traveling in the African continent. I love that so very much. I'm not going to tell you which European country I had a conversation with one of their officials, and they said, Kenyans are not applying. They're not applying for visas. I don't think. It was supposed to be treated as a problem. I said that's the best possible news that I could I've heard. So that the privileging of ourselves and being shameless about our joy and our immensity, wearing our bigness, and I hope yours is the generation. I certainly am one of those who do so anyway. Who refuse to. I treat colonial history, as violent and wicked as it was, as a footnote, because the immensities of the world. I mean, we are custodians of the entire world's history. So I call us a multi-century civilization that seeded the world's civilizations. So and do so without any form of apology or explanation. To be honest, actually, we have the receipts. Go to Turkana, you'll find evidence of humanity's beginnings. But to be able to, so that's and to be awake to the ways and places of our histories, and also our geographies, but also our histories in particular. Kenyans going to Turkana, you go to Kitmikai, to their records and archives available, to treat history as one of our most powerful weapons of mass ignorance destruction. History is gold, pure gold, and I think part of the tragedy is, and there's also a role for educationists and curriculum planners to ensure that African history, the histories of Africa, returns to the curriculum as part of the core, as a core subject, not as an option. Because history is also about literacy. You understand? So you asked about my research process. It was understanding that I couldn't just go into a text, even if a story struck me, say a story of the ocean struck me, I couldn't avoid even if I wanted to.
Yes.
Because that was my inclination not to do it. I owed a generation, I owed the idea, the notion of, when you're writing, the notion of truthfulness. But to get to that place of truthfulness, notice I didn't say truth, truthfulness, it required research, to talk to the scholars. And the information is way, way out there. To make research fun again.
I think research is always interesting, especially when you're looking up or reading into something that is. I have recently taken to, well, not very recently, but lately I've been very interested in the history of the Wakefana religion in Ethiopia.
Oh my goodness!
Because you know, my father was my father is Ethiopian. He's Oromo.
Yes,
but it's something that he never talks about, that religious part. He's very Muslim now and committed to this religion, but it always bugged me. How is it that he's come to this point where this is not something that he even wants to reflect on? Because there's this erasure festival that usually happens in Ethiopia around August, end of August, early September maybe.
Yeah.
And it's a ceremony of, celebrating the rains, and it's such a beautiful gratitude festival. It's more of a sort of a Thanksgiving ceremony, and all these people dress in all these colorful attires and sing and go to the lake, and it's beautiful. And whenever it comes around, he sends us this verses that from the Quran, or this teaching sort of that say this is an abomination, or it's what is it? It's haram kind of thing.
It's haram. Unfortunately, the way. Please remember, there were waves of both Islam and Christianity that were embedded in the continent that were more accommodating and sheltering. The waves that come in from fanatics and fundamentalists who are not of our culture, who think that their version of religion, I'm thinking also, maybe I wouldn't, the Pentecostal mindset that people are complaining about right now. To understand that it comes from a fanaticism embedded in a particular culture that maybe because of wealth and access then project their limited imagination of God, of Allah, that constrains the bigness and vastness and immensity of eternity, and tries to confine it into a book that is supposed to be a guiding point. There's supposed to be a map into the heart of God. So we lose the gifts. So that has to be allowed. That has to be in a way addressed. The generation that were told that their ways were so completely wrong, that they lost faith in themselves and then created an identity based on what another's interpretation. That's the other thing. Imposed upon them. But I hope that there's a generation that understands this. It's not a contradiction.
It is. It's not. I don't think there's a weight of one over the other. But I think that's also part of the violence of colonization and this religions that came to Africa. They were not polite in asking people to convert. There was a use of force. There was a lot of suffering that went into convincing people to believe in, and the magnitude of that violence, I think, is not. I don't know if we have conversations around
we
that.
We need to have those conversations. We need to address those conversations so that, for example, they are those who then presume that they brought those religions can be returned to their places. I mean, Christianity existed on the African continent long before it showed up in Europe, and it's I know everyone talks about the Ethiopian, but there was the Nubian, the Axumites, the entire northern Africa stretch, which by the way had not been invaded by Arabs yet, informed and shaped what Christianity, what happens, what becomes Christianity in Europe. And these same Europeans who have received this thing from our landscapes then returns pretending that they're the custodians of something that had existed here. So when you go into the archives, so my new book Nocturne really looks into some aspects of that, and you find how profound and intense and vast, they say Christianity was in the Kingdom of Congo and what becomes the big Kingdom of Congo that encompasses both Congo and Angola. That they had diplomats and emissaries in the Vatican themselves, and that is at the time before these people, these interlopers show up and say, "Oh, what we've come to bring you is Christianity." But then to understand that they had to say that we've come to bring you, say, Christianity, or in different cases, Islam, because they brought nothing. They had absolutely nothing. They came with chains, but they could only lay claim to saying they've brought Christianity. Because literally, if we do a proper forensic historical analysis, when these people came, they came with nothing. Well, they did come with guns and violence, but they had nothing. They had absolutely nothing to offer the continent.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're waking up to that reality now that and even this philanthropy and donating to Africa, it's I think the veil is fallen off of that feeling of saviorship that we had with them, thinking that they're bringing us this, they're doing us. I haven't had a stupid remark in a long time until recently. We were on a hike somewhere and just coming down the mountain, and someone behind me and my sister said, "Oh, what would we do? Where would we be if it weren't for colonization? We wouldn't have schools."
Who said
they
that?
built
Somebody
some
actually
guy.
said that?
Somebody said that, and this is what 2026. It was 2 months ago. I think.
Goodness.
And we just stopped in our tracks and turned around. And I was like, "What the hell are you saying?" Because I couldn't believe that there's a young person. This is something you might expect to hear from someone who's aging.
Yes.
This is a very young guy, probably younger than myself.
Yeah.
And I was baffled to hear that. And he said, "Oh, have you seen a photo of London in 1962?
Oh, come on, guys.
I was like, "Have you seen Africa?
Have you seen the Kingdom of Benin? Have you seen the Asante Kingdom? Come on."
We talk about the pyramids of Sudan and Giza, and we still have to compare ourselves to London of 1962.
No way.
Yeah.
But there's this is the character of the. It's not just brainwashing; it's a kind of hypnotic state, a trance state, that removed people from the reality that they were living, and so they are constantly negotiating this artificial system that offers it, a parasitic system that offers itself as reality. Yes.
Yeah, I think. How do you suppose we can incorporate? Because I feel like maybe our education system is not particularly preparing us for these realities that we are now coming to discover, even I in my adulthood. And I spent so many years in school learning crap.
My dear, I think the gift is that you were aware now. You've become aware to use the same tools now. If to start the same lobbying that happens, say for other things, for useless things, we need to start lobbying. The people need to start lobbying the Ministry of Education directly, as well as the Kenya curriculum, the school, the curriculum. Those ones. It has to be, the pressure has to come from below. But having said that, I think this kind of thing that you're doing, these alt education spaces in a way that you're creating, the things like the drunken lectures. So to create public engagement with history spaces that can take any form and happen anywhere. It would be going to somebody to say, going to say somebody like Paula Kahumbu and say, "Okay, now Paula, give us the lineage and proper history around conservation and environmentalism." And so that we understand that it's a long, long legacy. And the custodianship is very, very profoundly African. Our challenge is going to be that you're going to have counter narratives. You're going to have, because you've got a whole lot of people who built their own history and delusion of supremacy through appropriating other people's realities and knowledges. So those who, when you take back this from that culture, expect a major pushback, because ultimately they will be forced to confront their own emptiness.
I think we will. I don't know. I feel like the conversations are happening, the visit to schools and just generally talking, especially now that there's social media and it's widely accessible to even little children, trying to create more of this content even online where they can easily access it might be a good place to start, even as we push the KICD and the education sector to do something about it. Because I think there's no reason for a child to spend, 12, 13 years in school studying and learning and then come out having known nothing about their history and nothing about themselves.
Or come out saying, oh, where would we be without this?
That was so baffling to me. And I was like, maybe I hang out with too many smart people.
So in a way, poor thing, hopefully you addressed him, created enough doubt so that he now starts to embark on his own journey. Which is important.
Yes, it is. Unfortunately not. I was too shocked, and it was so cold, and Mount Kenya, it was raining, and I wish I had, and it's in these reflections that actually that's something that had me thinking about the reactive nature of people, and myself included sometimes, how we do not anticipate, or we do not confront things in the immediate moments they occur. And so then we live in this reflection that we're always looking back and thinking something could have been different, but we don't do it in the moment. Most of the time,
to allow just to implant, because it becomes part of the healing. Our own healing journey as a continent is that, to when the space opens itself, like it did in this person, to be able to implant. If not the full healing, if can't strip the full bandage and cause him shock, to implant the seeds that will force him onto his own journey.
I truly wish I had. There's something Ben Okri wrote in the Guardian, and just a part of it. It says Black and African writers are read for their novels about slavery, colonialism, poverty, civil wars, imprisonment, female circumcision. In short, for subjects that reflect the troubles of African Black people as perceived by the rest of the world. They are defined by their subjects. And I think we've written a lot of these heavy pasts, the grief, the loss, and it is with us, yes, but are we really expected to tell the stories, and who expects us to tell them, and do we have to tell it how they expect us?
No, of course not. You must never do that.
Yeah.
There's a certain kind of novel of Africa that will get rewarded.
Yes.
To be honest, I never expect mine to be. Why? Because of both the psychological and philosophical content. The assumption that we are philosophical, psychological people who question big thinking and insist on a universal imprint and presence is usually treated with a great deal of what do you call it? Let's put it this way. Those who know it and see it, know and see what it really is. We can speak about our griefs, but not as a thing of wallowing, but as a reflection of collective human grief. But we should also, as complete human beings, we should also explore our mischiefs, our loves, our losses, our desires, our failures, but to do so not as a thing, which is the thing that usually they say corruption is African, that kind of thing. The whole thing of suffering is African. Yes. No. But to deal with it as suffering as a universal riddle.
Suffering as a universal riddle. I love that. And there's a lot of suffering. There's Congo, and I read somewhere that it's referred to as the silent genocide. I'm like, it's not silent. It's not silent. It's been going on for as long as I can remember. There's Congo, there's Sudan, there's Gaza. There's all these tragedies that happen across the world, and I think creatives, personally, it sort of just cripples me in a way that it's very difficult for me to write or to write without reflecting or thinking about that. And I wonder how we can write stories of joy, stories of relief. How do we find a place of consolation to write? Because these moments have, happier places to be to.
But to not be afraid of not to be afraid of the abyss, because that is not to point fingers, but the West hates the sight of its own abyss. Our superpower is our capacity to look into the darkness. I don't want to use the word darkness because there's a connotation there that maybe we can look at later. To look into the void fearlessly. Actually, even if we have to look at it with fear, but to dare to look into it. One of the things you notice, like for example, let me give you an example of what I mean, and it's a kind of mindset. Remember how America is defeated in Vietnam? What does it do? It now makes films about how it wins in Vietnam, and that becomes the imagined reality that everybody encounters. Very few understand that America was defeated by the Vietnamese. Hollywood has changed the story so that it looks like the Americans they're always saving somebody in Vietnam or going to save the last missing soldier. So it's not a country. The West is not, because of the atrocities, the existential atrocities Europe visited upon humanity. One of the things they cannot ever do properly is look into the hole in their soul. But this becomes our superpower. Those who were made to, who were turned into the sacrifice, right, for this emptiness. But when the sacrifice, the scapegoat turns around, because the scapegoat is supposed to be slaughtered and you're supposed to be silent. But if the scapegoat starts to bleat, all right, it actually changes the dynamic completely. But to make sure the bleating is beautiful. But for God's sake, bleat. Do not just bleed to death in silence. Right? Yes, we have Gaza. I'm glad. I was in. Can you believe, Munira? A few months ago, when I was in Europe, in Germany, you can't. People can't even say Palestine in public. There's this kind of looking around and they whisper Palestine, or they say the P word, or Gaza. So for me, as one who, and I think that's also the other role of the writer who looks at the things of human pain is the writer as witness. You can't get away from that. It's a calling. We are called to witness to the human wound. Yes, to the human joy, the human heart, but also to the human wound. Is to understand, for me to look at them as human beings, not as the other, as human beings who do not want to ever confront the ugliness of that which they have written into our reality. So that and this, I think, and like I said, even if we're going to write about the wound, but to know that the wound is not just how would one put it? Flowers also grow on a grave.
Yes.
Write about the grave, but also write about the flowers. Okay. Yeah.
That's very helpful. I don't think I've had better advice in a long time. Because I do seek a way to express. I don't want to be overwhelmed by these stories of grief and sadness, but it's there in the world, so you cannot ignore it. You can't neglect to tell these stories because they're happening in your time, and you are a storyteller. We are the writers of the future. The stories. Sometimes I read a book from way in the past, and I wonder if this person ever thought that some girl from Marsabit in 2026 will be reading this book in a random cafe in Marsabit town.
Isn't that so beautiful?
Yeah.
Isn't that so beautiful? And these are the kind of like the echoes of the ancestral echoes.
Yes.
I went to Turkana and saw the etchings, the petroglyphs on this incredible hill,
Yes.
hill of rock.
Yes.
And these were what? They were over 15,000 years old. And I was thinking, these are echoes of ancestors.
Yes.
Somebody who was etching the rock that time, thinking, with a strange woman who's grown up in Nairobi, climbing a mountain, look at that and say, and I'd say, but who are you? What is your life? What made you do this?
Yeah. It's very interesting. I think the history has always been more fascinating to me than the future. And so I keep going back to some other place in the past. I like reading older books or historical fictions, something that tells me about some place in the past that I couldn't possibly access, because I have a feeling I might see the future if I live long enough.
Right.
But I would never go back to the past, and the only way to go back there is through these stories that I read, or documentaries that I watch. I recently came across this irrigation system that Africans in Niger used to grow crops in the desert. It was one of the most fascinating things. I had never heard about it. I feel like the publishing houses we have in Kenya, we've always talked about how they're more focused on school books so they can sell the texts. But I think they're very wrong in taking that approach and thinking that Kenyans are not reading. So what do we do as writers who want to tell these different stories that might not be quote unquote marketable?
Stories are always marketable, but we just have to find new ways of thinking. The same way Europe invented their past and histories. People, they appropriated, say, Roman and Greek lineages in order to construct the idea of Europe. So can we? But what they also did is they surrounded themselves with philosophers and storytellers who would repeat and reiterate this new story, which is exactly what we must do. But that also means inventing systems and structures. And I think also with the new, not just the new generation, with new technologies, we can. There are new ways. So we don't need to look at the publishing houses. I think probably unless they change, their time may have passed. But to be open to what new systems of information and story creation exist and put them out. I go back to what China did very quickly. It's Deng Xiaoping who woke up to the moment of when his country was so devastated. The multiple years of the Cultural Revolution had fallen apart. They were so destitute in so many places. In so many places, they were using cooking oil to move their cars. And he sent. He selected a couple of people, looking very, very kind of gray, so to say, to travel the world. To see, and this is a time when you don't have too much money, to see what is it that we did wrong, what is it that these people have done right, to send out an intelligence gathering delegation that are not made just that were made from people from across the disciplines. And one of the amazing things that country did, and I keep mentioning them because when I was in school, there was a time we were told to donate our break money to raise money for the poor, starving people of China. So it was so this growth in China happens in my lifetime. So. So what the next thing he did is they organized storytellers and filmmakers to go into Chinese past to remind his people, because they were so devastated. I remember their history, a bit like ours, had been kind of like the post-colonial was the narrative of China at that time. But these filmmakers helped remind China that, guys, we're a 3,000-year civilization. We've risen and we've fallen and we've risen and we've fallen, but guess what? We've survived. How did they do it? Film. This massive, invested in this incredible historical drama, all the ones that we ended up seeing, but we didn't understand that this was a process of a reinvigoration, a resurrection of the imagination of a people. And everything else now follows. And there's absolutely nothing stopping us from doing exactly the same. So,
I think we've never had good leadership to sort of propel us in this direction. I don't like to call them leaders. These are just politicians who are,
politicians and rent seekers and lackeys of powers that have been at war with us for 500 years. We're the only ones who don't seem to realize. Our leaders are the only ones who don't. Well, Ibrahim Traore understands it, but our leaders are the only ones that don't understand that the war has never ended.
Exactly, because those colonialism, yes, it looks like it ended, but the neo-colonialism is equally terrible, and I think it continues to take.
It continues to take as long as, and now I'm going to also push back against that word colonialism. Why? Because if we say colonialism, well, then we don't understand that it's a war.
Yes.
That I had an argument with some of my European friends when they were talking about World War One. I said, no. Well, your World War One was World War Two. The First World War was the so-called scramble against Africa because that was the First World War. That was the First World War, and it's a world war that has never ended. There has never been an armistice. There's never been a ceasefire.
Yeah.
So I more and more, and I'm sure you're going to run into that when you're going into the archives, the more and more you understand that this thing we're calling colonialism is a euphemism.
Yeah.
It's a euphemism. If we start to recognize it as a war that has never had a ceasefire, strategies and mindsets also change. Yes.
True.
Yeah.
Because the atrocities are things we're still dealing with. I was listening to she's a researcher, and she was talking about the history of trauma and how it's intergenerational in the sense that you can actually inherit some of those traumas. And it wasn't that long ago that, this war ended, quote unquote.
Oh, it's been ongoing.
And it keeps going. And even our politicians and the leaders of this country colluding with the West time and time again, it continues to push us down to a point where you do not have, I don't want to call it the luxury, because sometimes we joke about how people who have money tour the world to go and find themselves. And we don't have that luxury because you actually have to make a living, and it's a day-to-day living. And this entire employment system, sometimes if I meet a lot of people who are like, I'm a lawyer, but I like to write. I just don't get the time. I'm this and that, but I would love to write, but it's just difficult because, I have to get to work. And I think the entire system sort of just pushes back on the chance of us actually creating
it. But isn't that the nature and the character of a war?
Yeah.
Isn't that the nature and the character of a war?
Yes.
And you know what? There's a kind of not just more than irony. There's a kind of, I think now I'm calling it even darao.
Yeah.
The kind of energy Europe and the West invested in telling the story of the what you call it, the what we now know as the Holocaust.
Yeah.
The fact that there are nations like Germany and even the United States paying the children and the children of the children of those who suffered the Holocaust because they understand that trauma passes down.
Yes.
Yet that grace is not extended to a people and a continent that their ancestors have devastated and from which they benefit from to this particular day. But having said that, I think the only conclusion one can make is that the war is ongoing.
Yeah.
The war has not ended, so there'll be no grace extended because there's no ceasefire. But we're the only ones. A lot of us are the only ones who don't understand that we are on a war battleground. That so many times our leaders are merely kind of like colonial governors.
Yes.
Yes,
absolutely.
they are the governors of outposts. That so many of these countries, especially say in our cases, the USA and Britain, do treat a country like Kenya as one of their outposts.
Yes.
Yes.
True.
So unless one awakens to that reality, and I'm not saying that you're going around with guns and so on, but you go in conscious that we are still in a state of war.
Absolutely.
Then a lot of the things that you encounter start to take their rightful shape. So we understand now, oh, IMF, this is what you are. World Bank, I see. Your role is to ensure that any population rising is immiserated. Money is taken away from your pocket. So you're going to use something like KRA to rob the ordinary people of a country like this, so that any leisure money to think and to reflect and to create differently is removed from their pocket. So they're constantly striving for money for education, money for health, struggling for money for food. So they're preoccupied. They're in permanent survival mode. I think when you understand that, when you understand that, for example, most of the time our election systems, when you start to do, I wish somebody would just do a full study of which are the parasites that are linked around our election systems, then you'll understand that the role of elections is to further the interest of those who are at war with us. So I think when we wake up to that, as you can see, even our own language and mindset changes. I think a lot of things will fall into place, at least in our minds. Yes.
And I don't know, it might take a while to shift all of that. I was reading an article, I think it was on the BBC, a former prime minister, a UK prime minister, saying that the colonial, what did they call us? The colonized countries rather needed to pay reparation to the UK for what was it, loss of labor or something like that? Oh no, for the civilization they brought us or something like that.
Do you understand? Yes. No, I don't. But that's the story they tell themselves. Number one, that's a story they tell themselves, and also because there has been no what do you call it? If I could do things again, I would become a kind of forensic-based history lawyer that for the sake and to be a nuisance in the world, to just sue on the basis of evidence and fact. To force a conversation, because you see, we have never had a conversation with in Kenya, for example. We have never sat down with the Brits. To a lot of the time we end up reacting, but to have a civilized conversation about the lineage of atrocity, and what does it mean to be human in the face of this kind of existential abominations. So this person will have to do that, because to confront the reality would mean the loss of his own identity. To be able to say, actually, great-grandfather was a psychopath and is responsible for the death of millions would probably be too much for him to bear, to carry. Yes. But that conversation is something that we can have and must have, for ourselves at least.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we talk about it, at least in the circles I've been in. It's a recurrent conversation. And it does, keep showing you the depths of the atrocities that we endured and continue to endure now in different ways. Now, on to writing. We've talked about writing in the general sense, but you've been writing for a long time now.
Yes.
What are some of the things that seemed important maybe when you started that are now not as meaningful, or something that what is it that feels more meaningful now?
Fear.
Fear
is the most useless, the most unnecessary part of the writing journey. And if I were younger again, and I wish, but I can speak to the younger people, fear is the greatest waste of your time. But it will show up. But having said that, it becomes a companion when you're starting. To treat it as a companion, so that you are never ever complacent. Please never make an assumption that you know the character, know the story, but treat it as a companion, not something that inhibits. And because its sister, which is perfectionism, and this is what the thing that afflicts Kenyans so much. If I'm addressing Kenyan young writers, please, our perfectionism, don't.
Yeah.
Right. Because writing is rewriting, number one. Number two is that we have the power of editors.
Yes.
Editors can shape that can reach that perfection that you seek. No matter how much you write it, when the editor comes on the scene, they make it better. Or the trained editor, the good editor makes it really better. And you will never reach that perfection. So please, Kenyans, we need to write and write and write like the Nigerians do.
Yes.
They write anything and everything.
I know.
Yeah. But everything else matters. Reading matters even more. Constantly going back to the things that you thought you knew how to write a sentence. I still research how do you write a sentence and listen to what others say. How dialogue. Immerse yourself profoundly in metaphor, allegory, assonance, all of these things. These things really matter. The grammar, the what do you call it? The lexica and the because the grammar, whether you're writing in English or Luo or Portuguese or I don't know what, or hieroglyphics, the grammar is are kind of like your weapons and your tools, like your paint box. So to constantly, I think for me it's always I know it's I always have a beginner's mind every time I'm starting something. I start as if I do not know. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And are there stories that are more important than others? And also, does it matter the language in which we tell these stories? Or because there's the push for the African languages being incorporated into writing. Does it matter in which language?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter at all. I say that, and I know the Googyists would come for me, but I see it does not matter at all. Write in the language that the story shows up. I say that I belong to the Republic of Story, or to the Kingdom of Story. It's not necessarily a democracy, actually. So if the story shows up in Japanese, I will immerse myself in Japanese until I write that story in the way that it has shown up. There's a magical space, a threshold. I don't think we talk enough about the threshold worlds of the artist. And it has its own rules that we don't have power over. Our cultures have a name for this energy. In Luo, we call it juogi. The Spanish call it duende. And when it shows up on its own terms. Remember the guy who was doing the the sigia for the prime minister's funeral?
Yes.
When he came on stage, and then he says, "No, jogi or dagi." The muse has refused. So there is a world. So, and I know yes, there's the space the artist experiences where you're supposed to. You've got all these forces coming at you: history, reality, nation, expectations. But there's also the world of the art itself, the threshold world of art, and to say, what does the art demand of me? So the moment you were entering to the vocation of the world of the artist, I think there's certain responsibilities, and that includes language. How does the story show up? Good if it shows up in Oromo. But what do you do if it shows up in Chinese, in Mandarin? So
sure.
Yeah.
So you submit to the story.
I submit to the story. I belong to the moment I cross the threshold into the world of creation. My respect, my what do you call it? My master or my mistress is the story.
There's also the narrative of the starving artist, and I guess that's because most of the time when you're starting out, and it takes a long time maybe to quote unquote make it as a writer.
Munira,
artist.
The narrative of the starving artist is a systems problem. It's a systems and structure problem. It's a system and structure of a government that refuses to create a structure, an infrastructure, to support and sustain the work of the artist. It's also a government that does not understand that their power, their superpower, comes from what the artist creates, because we work with imagination. We are the cultivators of imagination.
Yes.
Imagination is what shapes futures. It's what shapes the direction. People forget that policy is a story. Everything that you hear, the policy is a story. The Constitution is a story.
Yes.
It's a story we tell ourselves. Everything stems and feeds from the realm of imagination. The part of, and the thing is that what happens to us is we, as I'm both a Pan-African and a global Africanist. Yet, in order for me to make a living through my art and calling, I have to borrow Western and other structures that give me the space to create, without the space to create while also feeding me. Which is what I have no. I was going to say I have no idea, but I have an idea. I know why our African spaces. They are, apart from maybe a few, and not many in South Africa, there are no spaces that support and sustain the life and the work of the artist.
It's unfortunate because I think we grew up on stories, whether it's written or oral. We grew up on stories, and even in Marsabit, I think my grandma told me so many stories. One of the earliest books I read was Margaret Ogula's The River and the Source. And I always tell the story of how I read about the chief dying of a fish bone stuck in his throat. I had never seen fish, let alone eat it. I was like not even a teenager yet at that point growing up, I think. And so I made a mental note of never eating fish. I have since then many times, but I'm still very cautious and always afraid that it would happen. But stories give us something that we might not otherwise receive.
But Munira, let me ask you a question. Where is story? I'm asking you, where is story?
Where is story?
Yes.
I think it's with us, whether written or unwritten. It's within us.
But so let me give you an example. So this is the other thing. This is the other mind shift we absolutely need. Remember when I said that the Europeans invented Europe?
Yes.
They needed to invent Europe because they were suffering the plague. They had lost, I think, something like 38% of their population. They needed a story. They needed to create a story of who they were, and appropriated Roman and Egypt and Roman and Greek histories, and that's why they keep trying to dip into the Egyptian histories as well, in order to create a lineage of who they become. And who they become is what they start to define in what we call the Enlightenment. All right, and the whole and we are living the story they told about themselves and the world to this day. China's BRI is a story that China told itself about its place in the world, and it becomes policy and strategy. We're the only ones who have refused. We're the only ones who think story is what you find in a book. You don't understand that story is how you imagine this country to be. We are living a Kenyan story, but it's not well defined for ourselves. We don't have a myth by which we live. Okay, and we do not understand, for example, that even what we think is the American dream is actually the American story. Story is in everything. Story is the SDG that we're told to follow. And before that, it was MDG, which didn't work. It fizzled. So it becomes SDG. To recognize that story is literally how we write our reality. So Kenya is a story. What is the story that how do we want it to unfold? Right. So to go to, yes, there's the story you find in the book, the dragonflies you or whatever, but to also have a story intelligence to be able to see what is this story. So part of the reason I walked away from social development was to was the moment of realizing, forgive the French, you buggers. You're telling us, you're insisting on this story about who we are. and are objecting to reality even when we meet it, so that we are in this perpetual state of begging, and what do you call it, and what do you call it, obligated to receive from you, who are perpetual saviors.
Yes.
But that is a story they told themselves. So to be able to dare to restory what's the other thing we need to do? We need to restory ourselves. Yeah.
Absolutely. This has been a wonderful conversation. I hope we give the listeners some nuggets on writing. But I absolutely wanted to delve into the history, our history with writing and with storytelling, and the story of who we are that we keep overlooking in our education system. Because it's the story I want to tell of the past, of who we were in the past and who we still are.
Who we still are.
Yes,
we carry their
to
blood.
be.
We carry the blood in our veins.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that, and I love. I always love reflecting on the stories even my parents tell me about my grandparents and my great grandparents. My grandparents mostly, they don't have the entire history of the lineage because of the disruptions and the wars and whatnot. But everything I hear about my ancestors, whether exaggerated or not, has always emboldened me. And again, that's a story.
I really look forward to meeting those ancestors literally through your story, Munira.
I will write them. I promise to. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Authors Fit. I have been talking to Yvonne Adhiambo. I hope you found the conversations insightful, as I did. See you again in the next episode, and have a lovely time.